Kaitlyn Donahue, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. You are the training specialist at Justice for All, and I cannot wait to hear about your story and why you're pro-life and why you specifically do work with another organization called Deeper Still, working as their executive director in Michigan. I think you're a really amazing pro-life activist and that more people should know about you. You have a story that matters. You are devoting time to the pro-life movement. That's very significant. This is your major thing. You're working full-time in the pro-life movement, and you've educated a lot of people, teaching them how to be better advocates, and you've helped a lot of women who are either considering abortion, helping them to choose life, and then you've helped women to heal after they have gone through having an abortion, which is a very traumatic experience. It takes a lot of knowledge and care in order to meet them where they're at. So I would love to share about your story today with our listeners so they can know how they can better help women who are abortion-minded and help people to heal in their community and how to be a better pro-life activist.
Yeah.
So will you tell us a little bit about you and how you became pro-life?
Yeah, so I grew up in a very pro-life family. As young as I can remember, we were involved in the pregnancy center and involved in things like Life Chain as a family. But I really didn't get heavily involved until after Bible college. I did an internship with a small pro-life group called Justice for All, and I saw in them a desire to meet people where they were at, and they were meeting pro-choice people and showing love and compassion for them while also meeting them with truth. And I just loved that approach of, we aren't going to compromise on the truth. The truth is really important. We care about the truth. But we're going to still meet people with love and grace and compassion because they're lost. They're not, we're not assuming they're evil. We're assuming they're lost. And so we're going to meet them with compassion because we love them.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you're right. There are different approaches in the pro-life movement to how we understand pro-choice people and abortion-minded women, and it is very compelling to meet someone who has both the justice side and the compassion side. So it sounds like that really drew you in because you're watching them interact and they're not like screaming at them, but they're also not like, oh sure, that's fine to have an abortion, whatever. Like they're meeting with compassion and with boldness.
Yes.
That's amazing that really drew you in. So how did you get connected to this internship originally, and why did you want to do it?
Yeah, so I when I attended Bible college, they did a training event for our student body, and they teach pro-life people how to talk about abortion in a way that's loving and persuasive. And so they'd done that training event, and I just remember thinking, wow, this is really amazing. I love the way they're caring for people and the way they're sharing truth with people. And then I actually did outreach with them as a volunteer. Because they were doing a training event and then they were going to a big university to do outreach the next few days. And so I went and I got permission to skip some classes, and I went and I did outreach with them. And I was just blown away watching students who disagreed with them about everything actually spend hours talking to them and enjoying talking with them. There would be students who would, spend an hour talking and then they would leave and then they'd come back and say, I had to go to class, but I wanted to talk to you guys more. And just seeing students desire that conversation about abortion and about the gospel, even though they were being challenged on their beliefs. I was just like, wow, this is amazing. I've never seen this before. And so that was kind of the beginning of my interest in them. And then later on, they were looking for an intern, and I didn't see myself doing pro-life work long-term at all. I actually was wanting to work with hurting women, so I thought, I'll work with women coming out of human trafficking, women coming off of drugs, something like that. But when they offered me the internship, I thought, I could do this for 3 months. And so I did it for 3 months, and during that 3 months, I began to realize how much abortion harms women and how few people are addressing that problem. And so that 3 months turned into nearly 8 years, with also an emphasis in helping women heal from abortion.
That is so amazing. 8 years. That's just incredible. You're a young woman and you've devoted most of your working years to protecting the unborn. That's rare. Today in our culture, it's just not common for people to give themselves fully to a cause and to spend your best working hours of the day trying to help the unborn and women who are post-abortive. So what do you think it was about, going back to your internship experience, right? So you're watching them have these outreaches, and you see them talking to people who are, pro-choice, and at this point you're probably meeting some post-abortive women too. Why were you so drawn to post-abortive women? Why did you want to help them?
Yeah, I talked to so many women or loved ones of women who often would say something like, if Jesus loved my baby, he can't love me because I killed my baby. Or, not only am I a murderer, like I'm way worse than a murderer because I didn't just kill some random stranger, I killed my own baby. Like it doesn't get worse than that, and the gospel just can't apply to me. Jesus just can't love me. And that broke my heart, realizing so many of these women are so broken over their sin, and they really feel like there's no hope for them. And unfortunately, often the church is not addressing that for them. And so often when a church is silent, it confirms for them. They're like, it's so bad that nobody wants to talk about it. Right. It must be unforgivable. Or some churches that do address it often, unfortunately, like there's condemnation of sin, which is important, but not a lot of message of forgiveness for women who've experienced that. And so I've just talked to so many women who just feel like Jesus can't love them and there's no hope for them. And that's not true. And I want them to know that. So
That's a beautiful message to a woman who's hurting, right? And we both know, as being Christians, like God loves the person who is lowly in spirit, right? Because actually it is the people that are most prideful that are most repulsive to God. So if people are like, well, I've never had an abortion, I'm so excellent, I'm so great, and I'm like, if you have a condescending attitude, God hates that. Right. So really it's these women that are in a mindset of, I really have done incredible wrong, and I've really sinned against God. God loves to meet people who really acknowledge their brokenness. They've really acknowledged that they've done something that's broken his law, and they've done something that breaks the heart of God. That's someone that God can really transform. Not someone who's prideful and like, I've got it together, I'm fine, right? Yeah. So really, in that brokenness is a great place to start transformation.
Yeah, it really is. It reminds me of the woman in Luke 7 who, comes, and she's described as a sinful woman, and she falls down at the feet of Jesus, and she's washing his feet with her tears. And Jesus has this conversation with the Pharisee about how she's sinful, and if he knew who was touching her, he wouldn't let her touch him. And Jesus says to him, the one who's forgiven much loves much, and commends her for her love for him. And that's what I've seen with post-abortive women is when they experience the forgiveness of Jesus, there's no one who loves him more. There's no one who worships him more wholeheartedly. There's no one who serves him more just completely. It's really beautiful.
It's amazing. Yeah, God loves to meet the broken, and it's beautiful to see that he gave you that heart. Because even back when you were talking about in mission school, and you're like, I want to help some hurting women. Like God was already planting it in you to love people who are broken and people who have really sinned against him. Because it is hard sometimes. Some pro-life advocates have a difficult time understanding both that the unborn child is destroyed violently, and that we can also love and care for the mother. So how do you guide people when they are kind of caught in that, where like they are very justice-minded and the unborn child has been treated unjustly? How can they develop compassion for the post-abortive mom?
Yeah, I think one thing that helps some people is just to recognize where she's at. There may be a woman who was just irresponsible and has everything she needs and chooses abortion. But I would say that's the kind of not the norm. Most of the women that I work with, they experience sexual abuse at a young age. They didn't have healthy parents. They didn't have healthy role models. They don't know what love should look like. And so, they're looking for love and security and find themselves pregnant, and often they don't have parental support. They don't have the support of the father of the baby.
So like they're alone in the world.
They're alone in the world. They often don't have resources, which none of that justifies taking the life of a child. But for many of them, they're in this panic mode of, my life is horrible. I don't want my child to go through what I'm going through. I couldn't protect myself from abuse. How am I going to protect my child from abuse? And so it's not right. It doesn't justify it. But I think in many cases, these women are victims themselves, and they need people to come alongside them and meet them there outside the abortion clinic and say, hey, we can, let us help you. But without that, they make this awful decision that's going to haunt them for the rest of their life. But it's not because they're evil or want to kill someone. It's because they feel desperate and they don't have hope.
That's a really crucial distinction, because there are, unfortunately, kind of a group of pro-life people, which I feel like maybe we shouldn't even put the title pro-life on them, because it's really not pro-life behavior, that sometimes they try to demonize women that have had abortions. But I appreciate how you emphasize that it's not unlike, women who are, say, in human trafficking, and they do things that are you can't imagine how you'd make some of the choices that are in that situation, but it is it's that desperate, it's that low place where you feel like all of your choices are taken away, as far as this isn't the environment I wanted to raise my child in, nobody cares about me, I don't have any resources, my job is not going to be able to support me. It is a very scary and low place to be in when you're facing an unplanned pregnancy. And a lot of women don't receive the amount of grace and support they need to really feel empowered to choose life. And I'm so glad that part of your work is that you work to meet those women before they walk into the abortion clinic and go through with it. But then, if they go through with it, you still continue to meet them with grace, and that's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would you say to someone who's pro-life and they know someone in their community, maybe at church or at school, and a woman discloses to them that they've had an abortion in the past? How would you guide them to respond to her so that they can express compassion but also truth about abortion?
Yeah, so that happens to a lot of people, and it feels really overwhelming. How do I respond? And I don't think it's as complicated as we make it. I would encourage that person to start with saying, wow, I'm so sorry that happened to you. That is a really difficult thing to walk through. How are you doing? And just ask them really open-ended questions, just to open the door for her to share more if she wants to. Don't force her to share more, of course, but if she wants to share more, asking open-ended questions to just open that door can be really helpful.
What are some of those open-ended questions you ask women that feel non-threatening? Because of course sometimes people have the problem where they're talking to someone who's post-abortive and then they accidentally say something that does not set them at ease. They make them feel defensive by accident.
Yeah, I think I would say something like, you don't have to share anything with me, but if you'd like to share your story, I'd love to be just a listening ear. So that could be a good just way to open the conversation. But I might ask questions like, did you feel supported, or did you feel really alone? What was going on in your life that kind of drew you to that decision? And maybe how has that decision, or how has the abortion affected you since then? How's your heart doing since then? And just really open-ended questions. You don't want to come off as if you're prying about all the little details. A lot of post-abortive women have complained that people ask them about the procedure itself and how awful it was and all the gory details, and that feels really hard for a post-abortive woman. But just really open-ended questions that are focused on her and her heart and her experience can be really helpful in just allowing her to process through that. But I always kind of lead with, you don't have to tell me anything. I'd just love to be a listening ear for you if that's helpful. Mm-hmm. The other thing I would encourage is to recognize that often post-abortive women are going to appreciate follow-up. So I think for a lot of us, we think, wow, that's really personal. If she wants to talk about it, she can. I'd love to listen, but I'm not going to force her to talk about it. But a lot of post-abortive women have expressed to me that they shared it on accident. It kind of slipped out, and it was the deepest, darkest secret of their life, and they meant to never tell anyone. And so when it came out, they planned to pull back from that relationship. And a lot of times they will. They'll pull back from that relationship. They'll start avoiding you if they've shared that with you. They'll dodge you at church and try to avoid ever talking to you again. And so for you to follow up and say, hey, last week you shared something really hard with me, and I just want you to know, like, I'm still here for you. I love you. I really care. And if you ever want to talk more, I'd love to be here for you. Mm-hmm. That's going to be really powerful for a man or a woman, because men also struggle with loss after abortion as well. And then my encouragement is, you don't need to be a counselor. Find a good resource that's local and try to connect them to that resource. And then be persistent in that connection. I have a dear friend. I invited her to a Deeper Still retreat, which is a retreat we run for healing after abortion, and she couldn't come. And so the next retreat came around, and I said, hey, it's totally understandable. Life is busy. I know you couldn't make the last one, but hey, I just wanted you to know that there's another one coming, and we'd love to have you. And she couldn't come. And I probably invited her, 10 times. And she finally came, and she found such healing and such freedom. And she now serves on our teams, helping other women find freedom and healing. And she's just so grateful for just that persistence. And that's really common with our women, is it usually takes a lot of invitations because it's scary. They're afraid. Mm-hmm. But once they do come through a resource, a Bible study for healing, or walk through a counseling process for healing, or a retreat for healing, they're so grateful for that person who persisted and followed up and invited them over and over again.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And there probably is that wound too there, like feeling rejected, mm-hmm. feeling abandoned. Yes. So then it makes sense that a woman in that situation would want to pull back a lot, would yes. Be looking for the opportunity to exit. So then I appreciate how you shared those gentle ways that you can keep building a relationship with someone who might be feeling very evasive, right? They might be wanting to not share, not be open, and you've developed relationships with so many women who are post-abortive, because that is your field of work, it's what you do, and you've found ways to be a safe person for them, so that they don't feel like they have to run away, or that they don't have to end their relationship with you because of the shame, right. But that they can continue to share what they've really been through, and that you meet them with that incredible grace that God has for us.
Yeah.
I'd love to ask you next about what you just mentioned, post-abortive dads. Mm-hmm. That is such a unique group of people that we actually don't know very much about. Right. We're still learning about post-abortive women, how to serve them and help them heal. We know so little about post-abortive men. Mm-hmm. What can you tell us about that demographic, what they're like, and what they're suffering through?
Yeah, men experience trauma from abortion just like women do. It's a little different because for a woman, she has a memory of the abortion on her, in her body, in a really unique way. But for men, God wired men to be providers and protectors. And so abortion cuts at the very core of who God created men to be. And so I've seen men who, they can't bond with their children because they feel like they failed this other child. And it feels like a betrayal of this other child if they bond with their now, the children that they have now. A lot of times men become extremely angry because anger is it's a great mask for other emotions, and I'm trying not to feel all the grief and all the sadness, and so I'm going to stuff that down, and what comes out is anger. It's really heartbreaking to see men who just feel like they aren't able to be men anymore because abortion stole that from them. Mm. So, and they often feel the same feelings of Jesus loved my baby, he can't love me. There's no healing, forgiveness, hope for me.
Mm. So how do people with your organization, Deeper Still, and in general, how do people meet those men to help them heal?
Yeah, we meet a lot of men in churches. We're always trying to partner with churches and provide post-abortion resources in churches. We have men and women who will share their stories at churches, and often if we can get one of our guys into a church to share his story, other men will come forward and talk with him and say, hey, I have the same story. So a lot of it is through word of mouth, because so often, a man or a woman they might pick up a brochure and reach out to us, but a brochure is so impersonal, whereas hearing from someone else who's walked their story and found healing on the other side, it gives them courage to go, well, maybe it's worth reaching out, because if they found healing, maybe I could too.
Right. And what are some of those strategies? Say you've sent a man to share his story at church, and like maybe you've trained him and helped him to be ready for now ministering to people who are going to maybe come up to him and say, hey, I had an abortion too. How can men who might be listening, how can men support other men that they may know who are post-abortive? What's helpful to them so that they can be a part of that healing journey?
Yeah, so it'd be very similar to what we talked about earlier with women, just asking open-ended questions about, how was that experience for him, and how is his heart doing, which is probably not a question men ask each other, but it's an important question, because abortion does affect a man's heart in a really significant way. And then, again, following up with him, because men feel deeply ashamed of abortion too, and so, maybe he shares that with you. It's good to follow up a week later and say, hey, I just want you to know I really care. And then I would encourage men out there to connect him to a resource for healing, because often, our Deeper Still retreats are run by women and men who, for the most part, our teams are made up of men and women who've had abortions in their past. And so to be able to say to this sweet man that you're trying to help, hey, would you like to walk through this and walk through healing with other guys who've been where you're at? That's very appealing, because for a lot of men and women, they've never talked to someone that they know has the same story as them. They probably have talked to someone who has the same story. They just don't know it because we don't talk about it. And so to be able to go to a retreat or a Bible study that's led by other men who have walked this road is really helpful.
Yeah. So it sounds like connecting with someone who has a similar past life experience of the abortion is very helpful, because they're able to like empathize with each other in a way that's like they really get each other.
Yeah, and they're able to, because, the enemy always wants to tell us lies. And out of trauma, he always tells us, he's always trying to plant lies in our minds. And he's not very creative. So with abortion, there's a few lies, like you are completely unlovable at this point. You're unredeemable. There's no hope for you. Those are the lies that the enemy wants to plant, and there may be others. But for a man or a woman who's walked that road and found the truth and is walking in the truth, they're going to be able to identify those lies very, very quickly and help this man or woman to replace those lies with the truth in a way that's going to be really helpful to them. Because that's what they need. They need the truth. They need to know that Jesus can forgive them, and they need to begin walking in his forgiveness. And, we might be able to help them with that, but a man who's been in their shoes is often going to be really able to help them in a really unique way.
That's so true. Yeah. So I want to connect your story a little bit here, because we kind of jumped, because I'm like, I have all these questions for you, right, about post-abortive women. So we were talking about how you were at Bible school, then you became an intern for Justice for All. Then you became a staff member, right, for Justice for All. How long were you a staff member of Justice for All before then we had another step that we'll talk about?
Yeah, so I joined the JFA team in 2018, and in that whole year, 2018, fall of 2018 through spring of 2019, I kept talking to loved ones of post-abortive women, loved ones of post-abortive men, or post-abortive women themselves. And a lot of the loved ones were saying to me, like, how do I help my loved one who's hurting? And I was just like, I'm not the expert on this. I do not know anything about this at all. And then I would talk to women. Like, there was this one seminar that just was so hard and heavy. And I think back on it, and it's still hard and heavy, because we were doing our normal training, and this woman comes up to me just in tears and shaking because she had an abortion, and I had nothing, like I didn't know what to say, I didn't know what to do. And so very quickly that just was weighing on me, because I had talked to all these people that I was just unable to help. And so I began looking into, like, what is out there for abortion recovery? And I bought all the different Bible studies so that I could read them. I looked into everything, and I started talking to friends of JFA's ministry who are post-abortive. We have all these women who do outreach with us, who love what we do, who support us, who have that story. And so I started reaching out to them and saying, hey, what was helpful? What wasn't helpful? And as I talked to them, I kept hearing about Deeper Still. And they would say something like, I did Forgiven and Set Free, and it was so good, and I would recommend it to anyone. But then I did Deeper Still, and I found even more healing. And I heard that a lot about different things. And so I was just really interested in, what is Deeper Still? And so in 2019, the fall of 2019, I met with the Deeper Still director here in Michigan, and I went through training in early 2020, like January of 2020, and I was signed up to serve on that retreat in January of 2020, and then it got canceled. And then the fall retreat also got canceled. And so I got trained by them and was involved and learning in 2019, but I didn't really start serving and working with post-abortive women until 2021. And in 2021, I began serving kind of all over the place. Deeper Still has currently like 34 chapters in the U.S. and some chapters internationally. And so I served on retreats in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Indiana, and then later on in Tennessee as well. And just, learned a lot through serving under different leaders and working with a lot of different women.
That's amazing. So what was your title at Justice for All? What was your specific job there?
Yeah, I'm a training specialist.
Specialist. Mm-hmm. Okay. So then you were pretty early in your job, and God's already laying people in your path to prepare you, to give you that desire for knowledge, right? Because part of what makes any of us kind of interesting or knowledgeable in any way is that curiosity or that drive to know more. So God put it in you. He's like, hey, I'm going to send you women, and you're not going to have the resources right now, but it's going to put it in you, this desire to know and to understand. And then you started getting involved with Deeper Still. And then eventually, living in Michigan, where we are now, you started to run part of Deeper Still. So how did that happen?
So I ended up moving to Ohio in fall of 2020, I guess. So I'd already gotten involved in the Michigan chapter, but I hadn't gotten to serve yet. But I moved because I had some family there that needed some support. Anyways, and so then I began serving in 2021, and I was serving in Michigan, and I was serving in Indiana, and I was serving in Pennsylvania. If you haven't noticed, that is a circle around Ohio. There was no chapter in Ohio. And so for JFA, I was speaking at churches in Ohio, and I talked to a sweet gentleman after speaking at a church in Ohio, and he was post-abortive, and I was encouraging him, I know it's a long drive, but it's worth it, make the drive. And then I spoke at another church in a little town, and this woman stayed after and shared her story, and I was like, I know it's a long drive, but it's worth the drive. And I kept saying that to people, and the Lord just began laying on my heart, we need a chapter in Ohio. And I was like, Lord, I just moved here, I don't know anyone. But we ended up working toward launching a chapter in Ohio, and we launched it in January of 2023. And the Lord was just so faithful, and he asked me to lead that, and I was like, I don't know anyone who's going to serve on the team. And so I prayed every day, Lord, bring me the people you want. And he built a team and just built a chapter in a way that was just so extraordinary and beautiful. So that's how I started leading in Deeper Still. And then in 2024, summer of 2024, I was talking with the director here in Michigan, and she was sharing that she wanted to retire. And she asked me if I would consider applying to be the new director here. And so because she asked me, not because I really had some strong desire to be the director here, I did apply, and the board asked me to become the director. So I'm now directing the Ohio chapter and the Michigan chapter through just kind of a crazy set of circumstances.
That's amazing. So you've really decided to devote yourself to work really hard for the unborn, right? Because something I did not know about you is I thought you had transitioned to work at Deeper Still, but you have 2 jobs.
Yes.
You work at Justice for All full-time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you also have basically a second full-time job of being the executive director at Deeper Still.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that really speaks to being passionate, which is amazing.
Yeah.
If you ever see someone in their element, it's really cool. Like, I get to work in healthcare, so I see people on occasion where they're very nerdy, right? Like, they really love cardiology, so they go to the cath lab and they do all this crazy stuff in the cath lab, but it's just really amazing when you see someone like, God planted it in them, that desire to know and to understand, and you can see in your story just the amazing ways God was just kept laying some more interest, some more curiosity, being able to like go and keep developing yourself until you have the knowledge that's going to help them and the support to help them. Like, that's really beautiful, like this journey God has had you on. And I love that you give God glory. Like you said, God built a team, and it's true. He answers prayer.
He does.
And, you know, when we're on a journey of our own, trying to figure out where God is leading us, you know, prayer plays such an important role, and you pray. You call out, you're like, God, you know, bring the people we need to make this happen, and it's really beautiful to see how your own journey of personal growth, like, God has met you, like, you've gone through these different jobs, you know, starting as a, you know, in school, in mission school, like, not sure yet where it was going to take you, and, you know, God has brought you to this place now of being able to help others in such a significant way to heal from abortion trauma and also to change their minds from pro-choice to pro-life, which is really amazing.
Yeah, God has been so faithful.
What is one of the most dramatic stories you've heard as you've talked to someone who's post-abortive? Maybe they were very uncomfortable sharing their story, very not healed, and then after interacting with your ministry, did experience that healing.
Yeah, we've had some really dramatic stories of God's grace in our women's lives. One of the most dramatic to me, even though it doesn't sound that dramatic, one of our ladies, she was 70, she'd had her abortion 50 years before, and she came and she was kind of like, her eyes weren't open all the way, like it was just like, she was just kind of hunched in on herself, she was kind of closed off, she was very quiet, and I began working with her. We have some times during the retreat where we'll work with our women individually, and I was walking through some stuff with her, and one of the things we talk about with women is, what are the words that have been spoken over you that you've embraced that aren't true, that aren't things that Jesus would say about you? And so she had her whole list of all these words. Ever since she could remember, she'd been called stupid and worthless and garbage, and these were words that she really believed about herself. And I asked her, is that what Jesus says about you? And she got it. Something clicked for her, and she realized, wow, that isn't my identity. And we went through a process of letting go of those words and embracing her identity as a daughter of the King. But it was just amazing, because by the end of the weekend, she was standing straighter, her eyes were open, she had this huge smile, and she became very bubbly. She went from being shy and closed in on herself to becoming very bubbly, and she grabbed my hands at the end of the retreat and she was like, I'm a daughter of the King. And that's remained true for her. She's walking in her identity as a daughter of the King. She's very bubbly, and just has so much joy now, because she's been able to lay 50 years of shame and guilt and just a twisted view of identity down. So that was a really beautiful story of just God's grace in her life.
That's amazing. And do you know, and I think it was 50 years ago, that might be before Roe versus Wade, did she share any of the details about her abortion?
She was virtually forced into the abortion by her husband, who was very abusive. So it could have been a no legal abortion. I don't think she would have known. He was so controlling and so abusive that I don't think she had much decision-making power at all. And I don't think she would have known at all what was going on, in all honesty. She was very young, and he was, like I said, very controlling. So
That's devastating. Yeah. That's so hard, because there's something about that when you're facing an unplanned pregnancy and then you're with someone that is not only unsupportive, but they're like, I will force violence on you to end this child's life. But there's just, I can't imagine the amount of trauma that caused her. Yeah. And it's so beautiful that you guys have these resources So when you meet her now and she still has this wound, which you said, was it 50 years? Is that right?
Years,
a 50-year-old wound.
Yeah.
Like, it's a very long time for these big, heavy feelings of pain to be carried. And you just think about what women go through in 50 years, right? So she probably had jobs she had to work. She had these expectations she's trying to meet while carrying this hefty weight. She had family relationships to keep up. She had, like, just, like, trying to keep herself going with all of that shame and weight and hurt. Like, that has got to be overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? So what were some of the things you did to help her with her identity? Because if that is one of those core struggles after abortion, is believing things about yourself that aren't true and that are, like, almost like re-traumatizing you, right? Like, you're telling yourself, like, I'm stupid and I'm, you know, worthless, like those things that seem common for women who are post-abortive. How do you go deep and do that hard work? Because I'm sure it's not easily undone after, say, 50 years.
Yeah, we have a few questions that we ask our ladies and give them some time to fill it out, and then we'll walk with them through it personally. So one of the questions we ask is, what are the lies or the things that you believe about yourself that aren't things that Jesus says about you? And then who are the people that you sinned against when you had your abortion? So that would be your baby. Is always on the list, but then often there's, you know, some people will say, you know, my other children, I denied them of a sibling, but then who sinned against you? And we'll ask them to make that list, and then we spend a lot of time walking through the gospel. What does the gospel mean? And then we'll go individually with them. So usually that's as a group, walking through, like, what is the gospel? What does it say? What does it mean? But then individually we'll go through that list and apply it individually to each person. So, you know, the gospel says, like, I've embraced Jesus' payment, that Jesus died on the cross to pay for my sin. And so I've embraced that payment, which means that my sin against my baby, it's actually paid in full. And this sounds cheesy to people, but we have written prayer not because we think that there's power in the prayer that we wrote, but because for a lot of women, they need language as they're walking through this process of, okay, this is someone that I just feel a tremendous weight because I sinned against, and I'm going to release that to Jesus and embrace the truth of the gospel, which is that my sin is paid in full. And then we go through the people that sinned against them and just acknowledge, okay, the gospel says my sin is paid in full. It actually also says that if they'll accept Jesus, their sin is paid in full. And so I'm going to embrace what Jesus did for me and extend it to them, and declare that their sin is paid in full. And that's a really powerful process of forgiveness that sets people free. We see so much healing as people embrace Jesus' forgiveness for them and then extend his forgiveness to other people. And then the identity piece is huge. We have a prayer that we walk them through where we're just renouncing, like, this is a lie, it's not from Jesus, and here's what Jesus says about me. Jesus says I'm loved, he says I'm his daughter, he says I'm precious to him, and I'm embracing that identity, and I'm choosing to believe that, and I'm choosing to reject this lie that I'm stupid or worthless or whatever it is.
It's beautiful. It's work that they probably have been avoiding entering into because it's so painful.
Yeah, for sure.
Being able to have that guided process and to know the gospel, that Christ died for our sin, like, it's so powerful. Knowing that, you know, it's not as the lie said that, you know, Jesus loves my baby, so he can't forgive me. Like, no, he can forgive you too.
Yeah,
it's amazing that we have that kind of God, that he's so redemptive, that, yes, he knitted the mother together in her mom's womb, but then also this child, and he is that kind of father. He's all of our first parent, right? So he's the first parent to that baby, and he is the parent that child needed, right? So he was, you know, as this child, you know, goes to be with God after they've been destroyed, like, it's amazing to think of God being the father to that child, and then also forgiving the mother, and being able to heal her and set her free from the bondage to these lies, and the incredible suffering. Because that's really remarkable, isn't it? That obviously abortion on its own itself, like, it can have physical complications, there can be trauma in the moment, but then it really does leave a long-lasting scar that a lot of people just don't anticipate. They think if it's going to be painful, it'll be in the moment, like, oh, it's a little pinchy or abdominal pain or bleeding, but it's so much greater.
Yeah.
Do you think in general women in our culture know how abortion will impact them when they go into it?
I don't think most women know, and I actually don't think most women know immediately. I think for a lot of women, they feel relieved right after because they've been so overwhelmed with fear and they don't know how they're gonna do this. And so for a lot of women, they feel relieved initially, but then very quickly after are hit with a lot of emotional pain around just the loss of their child and the grief that comes with that. And for a lot of women, it's a very confusing thing. I talked to a woman in Kansas. I was doing outreach on a college campus, and one of our volunteers was talking with her, and they were talking about biology. And just, that the unborn is biologically human. Very scientific conversation, if the unborn is growing, it must be alive type of thing. And the volunteer, such a sweet gal, she noticed that this gal she was talking to was tearing up. And so she stopped and she said, "This is a really heavy topic, isn't it?" And the gal burst into tears and shared that she'd had an abortion 3 months before. And so our volunteer waved me over, and I came into that conversation, and the gal was like, "It was the best decision I could have made. Like, I really needed this." And I said to her, I'm hearing you, that you say it was the best decision that you could have made, that you needed it. But I also know that abortion is not on any woman's bucket list. No woman wants an abortion. And so I just want you to know I'm really sorry that you had that experience. That's a really hard experience. And it was as if that gave her permission, because before she was very defensive and, it was the best decision I could have made. I needed it. And suddenly she was sharing about how hard it was and how confused she's felt because she thought it would be like in her mind it was what she needed. She still believed that, and yet she's been sad and she's been battling all these feelings of depression, and she's so confused and she doesn't understand why she has this mix of like relief and depression and all this stuff. And so we were able to talk through that, and I was able to offer her resources. But I think she's really normal. I think a lot of women feel this very confusing mixture of relief and also depression and sadness and brokenness. And it might take them 20 years to come to a place where they are fully repentant, but then all they're left with is sadness and brokenness, and at that point, like, they really need to be met with the gospel.
That's so true. It's a beautiful way that you met her too. Something I really admire about you is God gave you like a natural gift of compassion. Some people you meet and they have like maybe you're into like the temperaments. Some people are very choleric. I'm a little bit choleric myself, and we can be a little aggressive. That's not a great trait to bring into a very sensitive situation. So it's something I really value about you, that God made you very like naturally approachable and compassionate. It's a great gift to have in the line of work you're in. And you met her, and you did that. You had the truth and you had the mercy, and you said, I appreciate how you really emphasize with her, like, I hear you. Because that's so important. Because I think part of what throws women into the defense, I will defend this, and I'm not going to walk away screaming, how dare you pro-lifers, you just want to kill me, It does bring out that response in people when we're unkind to them. But I appreciate how you made sure she knew. You heard everything she said. You heard every word. You repeated back to her. And then you still have like this way of bringing the truth. So you're having this conversation with the woman, and you pointed out that one of the things she did almost immediately was defend her choice. And you made a really important point there, because a lot of women feel responsible. It's almost like as a result of the feminist movement, they have to prove, oh, well, this was an empowering abortion. This is really helping me. Because you said a college campus, right? Is where you met her. Okay, so she's probably in college. She's like, look, I had my abortion. I'm still going to class. I'm still developing my career. I needed this in order to make anything of myself, because surely the baby would have derailed all my career plan, and so, which we know isn't true, because that would be their support for them to be a parent and go to school. But it's so interesting how our culture has duped women to that degree, where we even like gaslight ourselves, right? So you just have gone through something very traumatic. In any other situation where a child dies, a miscarriage that nobody wanted, the death of a child who's already born, maybe at birth, or like a child who's older, maybe they're already an adult. Every single other context we acknowledge, this is horrifyingly traumatic for mom.
Absolutely.
Maybe we should see if she's okay. Maybe we should ask her, just like you said earlier, some open-ended questions and see like what she's suffering through. This is the only scenario with a child where women in our culture are convinced we should gaslight ourselves and go, oh, well, I feel a little sad. That's probably me. That's not the abortion. I just feel sad because it's my personality. I don't know. That's not the abortion. I'm very empowered. I'm fine.
Right.
Everything's okay. And I appreciate how you really very winsomely reached right past the message of the culture, and you said to her, like, you know, abortion is not something on women's bucket list.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure that was really difficult. You put it just right so that it didn't put her on the defense where she's like, I have to like tell you don't understand because you didn't have an abortion, you don't know what it's like. Instead she's like, oh, you noticed I might be grieving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm grieving actually. I'm
Yeah.
actually not okay. So that's really beautiful to meet women with that winsome like approach, and then to also just give her that incredible room to grieve, because one of the most incredible things I've learned about mental health is one of my interests. So like you learn about mental health and why people behave dysfunctionally. One of the causes is grief we never process appropriately.
Right.
So you gave her that moment right there,
Mm-hmm.
where you already saw she was hurting and she was trying to embrace cultural gaslighting. Not really her fault, just like it's a message out there in the culture that I'm a strong woman, I had an abortion, but I'm building my career and I'm becoming something, and if I didn't kill my baby, I couldn't achieve anything. I would just, end up this random woman on the side of the road, so I had to do it. I'm so empowered. And you reached right past that message and you said, I'm sorry. And she needed someone to acknowledge that someone should feel bad and sad with her about it. Like you mirrored her emotions. There's this whole concept in mental health about what makes some parents great, what makes some moms really great. And one of the things great moms do with their small kids, which small kids are very difficult sometimes, right? Because there's so many emotions and there's so little emotional control. One thing great moms do is they mirror. So like their little toddler fell on the floor and they're screaming bloody murder, and they're just like mirroring the sadness. I have a sad face back to them and they say, that hurt, didn't that?
Mm-hmm.
And it really is like that compassion that a mom has, like that you're bringing, right? That gives that person a context and an ability to share that they're hurt and they're broken and that there's still healing needed. And I love that God has developed you on this journey, not only to have one short conversation, but now to take it deeper and further so that women can go forward full of joy and healed. But also you care about men. So I'm curious, are there any stories you have about post-abortive men who have been transformed by the work of your organization?
Yeah, there's one that stands out. He was a dad of 6 kiddos, and his mom, or his wife had come through the retreat. They'd had their abortion together. It was their first child.
Were they like unmarried at the time? Is that why they had wanted to?
Yeah, I believe they were unmarried and maybe teenagers, and then later they got married and miraculously stayed together. Something that a lot of people don't know is that for a lot of people they're getting an abortion because they think that will help them stay together. And couples who get abortions together almost always break up or divorce. But they were beating that statistic. So they'd, if I remember correctly, they'd had an abortion together maybe in high school or something, and then they got married. They had 6 kiddos together, and she was struggling. And so she came through our retreat, found incredible healing, started serving with us, and just asked her husband to consider coming through too. And so he eventually did come through a retreat, and I was at his retreat, and she told us, she was like, he can't connect with our kids. Like, he's just very distant dad, because he feels so guilty about the abortion, and the kids remind him of the abortion, and so he feels guilty whenever he interacts with them. And so he was a very distant dad, and he came through the retreat. He embraced the forgiveness of Jesus, which is the first goal of our retreats, is we want our participants to understand the gospel, embrace that the gospel means that they can walk in the forgiveness that Jesus has for them and extend his forgiveness to other people. So that's goal 1, and he was walking in that. And then the second goal of our retreats is to create space for people to grieve, because as you said, we have to grieve, or our grief is unresolved and it comes out in really unhealthy ways. And so we create some space for our participants to grieve. And so he grieved really well. He and his wife grieved together for probably the first time. And at the end of the retreat, I'll never forget, he was like bouncing off the walls because he was so excited to go home and spend time with his kids. The kids that he's always avoided, the kids that he's been so ashamed to be around, the kids that he can't look at because he feels guilty whenever he sees them. He was so anxious because he's healed and free, and now he's able to be a dad. And just seeing the healing in their marriage and the healing in their family was just an incredible, beautiful picture of God's grace.
That's amazing. And imagine like the transformation for the kids,
Yeah.
right? Because children have this struggle where as adults we can be a little bit objective and say if someone's not being kind to me, it might be about them.
Right.
But kids always internalize everything, right? So this, attitude from dad of like, I'm being distant with you can be internalized as rejection to a child so deeply. So imagine like all this work of healing that you did with this dad to make sure he had the resources he needed to heal his identity and the grief, just allowing him to process that, to finally be able to go home to those 6 kids, and for possibly the first time in their life, they can bond with their dad.
Absolutely.
And children need their dad so badly. So imagining like just probably all the negative effects we don't even know that were already there from him not being able to, bond well with them. And now all of a sudden he's ready for repair, right? Now he's like, okay, there's some brokenness in these relationships, but I'm ready to repair.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Like that's going to change generations.
Yeah,
Because people pass their dysfunction down, you know what I mean?
So
Just
true.
like we were talking about unresolved grief, it's so weird, honestly, how, it's fascinating how human behavior, we don't ever just look at our families and go, oh, maybe we should stop doing that. Yeah, that's not good, maybe we shouldn't do that. We just keep passing it down. I remember this book called It Didn't Start With You by this guy named Mark Woolen, and had some good things in it, some bad things, like some pop psychology that's like, I don't know about that. But he was right about something, and he talked about how if you actually like map out your family's trauma, sometimes we repeat it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's true with abortion too.
Absolutely.
Have you seen that in the retreats? Have you met women where maybe their mom also had an abortion?
Yeah, we see that a lot where, grandma had an abortion, mom had an abortion, now she's had an abortion. And it's, we tell our participants, like, we want you to be free and healed from this so that your children don't have to carry this, because you don't want them to. And it's unfair that you carried your mom's burdens and you don't want your children to carry yours. Right. And so, we see that a lot, not just with abortion, but with even lies that people struggle with. Like, often rejection is something that, my grandma struggled with rejection, my mom struggled with rejection, now I'm struggling with rejection, and I'm seeing it in my kids, and it's just like these lies, these tendencies, we have to end them for ourselves so that we don't pass them on to the next generation.
That's so true. And can you think of any specific stories where there is generational abortion?
We have recently had a mom and daughter come through together. The mom had had an abortion years before, and the daughter had just recently had an abortion, and the mom had tried to talk her daughter out of it and felt so incredibly guilty that her daughter had had an abortion too. But the mom had had an abortion and regretted it, but hadn't healed from it, and didn't really know what freedom looked like, what healing looked like, what she kind of understood the gospel, but not really. And so she was struggling to share any of that with her daughter. She wanted freedom and healing and the gospel for her daughter, but how do I share that with my daughter when I've barely been given it myself? And so, it was honestly a really sad story to see that, but really, I was really thankful that they were both able to come together, and there was a lot of healing that took place at the retreat.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's really sad when people are so wounded, and for some reason we believe the lie that secrecy will help us, right? Like, don't talk about it, don't say anything about it, but I don't know what it is about kids, but they can always read the room, no matter what. They're like, something's wrong, something is off, there's some reason why my parents may be behaving dysfunctionally, and that's just so sad.
Yeah.
And
like you said, children internalize it and think it's about them. One of my team members talks about how she and her husband had had an abortion together before they were married, and then they got pregnant with her with her daughter, and then they got married shortly after they got pregnant with her daughter. And years later, they'd not told anyone about the abortion. And years later, they were in the church, they'd repented, all the things. And she was organizing a women's brunch. And she felt like the Lord woke her up in the middle of the night and convicted her that she was supposed to tell her story of her abortion and about his grace. And she was like, I'm not doing that. I refuse. And the Lord was like, no, you're going to do that. And she did, and she was obedient. And as she shared, she saw her daughter just weeping. And afterwards, she learned that her daughter had calculated her age and her parents' marriage, like how long they'd been married, and was like, I'm a mistake. I must be unwanted. Oh my. And my sweet friend was like, after hearing my story, my daughter was finally able to realize that she was actually redemption for us, and we wanted her desperately. But because I was keeping the secret, my daughter was, not only was I sick because of my secret, my daughter was sick because of my secret, and my daughter felt unwanted because of my secret. And so our secrets, they keep us sick for sure, but often they keep our kids sick, they keep our loved ones sick. And healing often really does start with confession, although it's really hard.
That's so true. That's amazing how that impacted that girl, right? I was expecting you to say she could tell her mom had an abortion, right? That's what I thought you were going to say. And then she's like, no, I am the unwanted one. Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. She could feel something was wrong. There's some, children are just so attuned, you know what I mean? They know that something's off in the way their parents are non-verbally communicate. We can only hide so much, right? We can hide things in our words. That's pretty easy for us as human beings, but then your behavior, so hard to hide in our behavior. So it really comes out in how we're acting. It's amazing that as she's observing her family, she's like, oh, I know why. I am unwanted. Mm-hmm. And that she felt that so deeply and for so long. At such a young age, she's already so wounded.
Right.
It's so sad. Thank God that healing came.
Yeah,
so that she could heal from that.
Yeah.
So I think one of the dysfunctions of our current culture is there's a problem in the corporate world where sometimes there are miscommunications or misunderstandings, right? And it really takes grace to heal from misunderstandings in a family or to overcome lies anywhere, including a corporation. And it's interesting that some people kind of take the approach of being aggressive and oh, well, imagine if the mother had taken the approach and she said to the daughter, I don't know why you're saying that. I don't know why you think you're unwanted. That doesn't make sense. You're making that up. You're making up stories, whatever. Then it kind of projects shame onto her.
Right.
We can't imagine why you're so crazy.
Yeah.
But instead, to start with, oh, mom and dad have some of our own things. We are going to go work deeply on that.
Yeah.
Then we're going to share this story that we don't even want to share. God's making me share it. And it's because God is literally working a healing for this other girl. She hears that. And instead of going, oh, I really made something up. I'm really crazy. I don't know why I put things there that weren't there. Instead she says, it does make sense that I was grieved and I was trying to understand it as best as a child could. Yeah. But then God decided to break down all the secrets and all the walls and all the wounds and heal instead. That's such a beautiful way to overcome what can be misunderstandings and wounds, because those do play a role in why we all hurt so much in our world today. But some ways are more effective than others to really get to the bottom of things. And I think many of the things you shared today talk about the power of gentleness. What would you say to a woman who has had an abortion and she is not healed yet? She's experiencing maybe a lot of trauma and pain from that. How can she begin to heal?
Yeah, I would take time to just hear her story and let her know that I really care about her for sure. And then I would definitely invite her to consider attending a retreat for healing after abortion, or maybe a Bible study, because often that it's going to be a process of unpacking that trauma and walking through it. And so a setting like a retreat or a Bible study is a really good place for that healing. And I would just encourage her, Jesus actually, when you ask a Christian, why did Jesus come? Most Christians would say, oh, he came to die on the cross for our sins. Absolutely, he did. But when Jesus gave his own mission statement, he actually says, I've come to heal the brokenhearted. And that's what Jesus said about himself, is that he came to heal the brokenhearted and to comfort all who mourn. And so for that woman who's brokenhearted and mourning, Jesus came for her, and he wants to set her free, and there is healing that's available for her. And so I'd encourage her to consider attending a retreat or a Bible study for healing after abortion, because I really do believe that Jesus wants to meet her and heal her and set her free. And I know it's a risk, and I know it's scary to consider attending and to spend time actually thinking about all the things we don't want to think about. But Jesus came to heal us, and that healing is so worth it.
That's so true. And Jesus is that compassionate Father to us, isn't he? He really does meet us with love and not condemnation.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's so hard. We had a woman at a recent retreat who said, after the retreat, she said, I've always run from a God because I feel dirty and I feel ashamed, and so his holy presence, I feel shamed. And she was like, through the retreat, I realized that God is, I discovered a God who gets in the brokenness with me. And I discovered a God that it's safe to sit within my brokenness. But I think for a lot of women, it's scary to think about going to a retreat or a Bible study, because if you feel like, God is holy and I'm dirty and I can't come into his presence, that makes sense. But that's why Jesus came. He came for all of us because we're all dirty, and he is holy, and he came to cleanse us, and he came to free us so that he can sit in our brokenness with us and heal us from it.
If you were just to talk, maybe just about, generally speaking, what women feel like after they have their abortion, what have you heard from women's stories, right? Have you heard about physical symptoms they felt during the abortion or after, maybe some effects they were not expecting, and then what would you say generally women go through psychologically after abortion?
Yeah, I don't usually hear a ton about the abortion itself, and I think that's not because abortion is not painful and miserable, but I think it's because that pales in comparison to how women feel emotionally after abortion. Women describe feeling completely hopeless, totally depressed. A lot of women struggle to connect with children after abortion. They may have loved children before, and now they avoid children. I talked to the sister of a post-abortive woman who said, whenever my sister comes to visit, she flips all the pictures of my children down because she just can't stand to look at a picture of a child because she feels so guilty. And we had a woman at a retreat recently who, at the end of the retreat, she was like, maybe I'll volunteer in the church nursery. Like, that was something that she would have avoided like the plague before, and now she's healed, and so she's actually considering being around children, which is a crazy thought to her that she could be around children again. So for a lot of women, there's struggle to be around children. There's struggle with relationships. So if you are terrified that people are going to find out something about you, you might just put up walls and keep people at a distance, because the closer they get, the more likely they are to find something out about you. And so for a lot of women, they struggle to connect with anyone after their abortion because they are afraid of people finding out about the abortion and then rejecting them. There's a lot of different emotional ramifications of abortion beyond even what I think people think about.
That's so true. And it makes your heart hurt when you think about those women too, because there can be that wrong response of anger towards women, of I just can't understand why women would have an abortion. And I'm someone who I haven't had an abortion, so it's going to be harder for me to empathize. Yeah. I'm like, I don't understand what it's like to be in those shoes. But then when you shared with me their stories, and this incredible pain they go through after releasing their child. It's not just this moment of the abortion. It's not like a 5 to 10 minute procedure sometimes and it's over. This is a lifetime of suffering.
Absolutely.
Which is just devastating. I think that helps those of us who are not post-abortive but will interact with those women, because probably all of us interact, pro-choice or pro-life, we're all interacting with post-abortive women sometimes, because they're in our environments, they're at work, they're at church, they're in our schools, and so that's so important for us to understand how much they're suffering and that what they're going through is really profound loss.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'll never forget. I have a sweet friend. She's just amazing. But she serves at Deeperstill, Pennsylvania, and she has a really hard story. So she was sold into sex trafficking at 13 by her mom, and trafficked. And at 13, she became pregnant and was dragged to an abortion clinic by her pimp. And then years later, she landed in jail. I'm not totally sure why. It may have been because prostitution is illegal, even though it was not her choice. But she ended up in jail, and she encountered Jesus in jail, and she ended up coming through our retreat after she got out of jail, and found incredible healing. But she would say, of all the dark, horrific, awful things she experienced, of being trafficked, and the abortion and all of that, the darkest, most awful experience of all of that was the abortion. And the hardest thing to heal from was the abortion, which is just kind of speaks to the level of pain that abortion brings, because all of the things she was experiencing are pain I can't imagine. Like, I can't even wrap my head around what her experience must feel like. And yet the worst of it was the abortion.
Wow. That's such a sad story.
Yeah.
So young.
Yeah.
So much trauma.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but she's amazing because she experienced forgiveness and healing and freedom in Jesus. And so she's now helping other women find freedom and healing too. And she's one of those women that just totally carries the joy of the Lord. Like, you see her and she just illuminates his joy. And so she's such a picture of the redemption of Jesus and beauty for ashes.
It's amazing. God really can redeem anyone, can't he? He can intervene in any story.
Yeah.
Aw, wow. It's amazing to me, like, human trafficking and abortion, they go together a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's just such a horrible story. Just being 13 years old and your pimp, like, forcing you to have an abortion. Like, I just can't even imagine the incredible amount of trauma that would involve. But, the only way that human trafficking can continue really is through abortion.
Right.
And so when we advocate for an end to abortion, we're also, like, making a very effective step towards stopping the human trafficking of women.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, it's amazing how so many injustices meet together. This has been such a powerful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible knowledge and just experience you've had in the pro-life movement and the things that you've learned as you have worked to help women heal after abortion. Is there anything that you would tell our listeners kind of in closing about post-abortive women or about pro-life ministry that you think they should know?
Yeah, I guess the one thing I would just remind everyone of is that in our culture today, something like 1 in 4 women will lose a child to abortion, and something like 1 in 5 men will lose a child to abortion. And so I think many people hear about post-abortive men and women and they're like, I've never met someone with that story. And that's just not true. We all know men and women with that story. And so I always, whenever I'm talking about abortion, I just always want to talk about it in a way that if someone who's post-abortive is listening, they're going to hear about healing and forgiveness and hope. Because I think too often we can assume, I know this person, like I can share all my frustration and anger about abortion with them. And we don't actually know if maybe in high school they had an abortion that they've never told us about. And so I think it's really important that whenever we talk about abortion, yes, we tell the truth. It is killing an innocent human being, a precious child. But we also want to talk about the mercy and forgiveness of Jesus, so that if that person is post-abortive, they know we're safe, that they can confide in us, and that they hear hope through us. I have a friend, she's on her church board, director of women's ministry. She and her husband took in a 13-year-old who was pregnant, and cared for her and provided a place for her because she didn't have anywhere to go. They were just wonderful Christian people. And we talked many times about abortion, and I knew she was very pro-life and all of that. And it wasn't until I was launching Deeperstill in Ohio that she heard about Deeper Still and was just convicted by the Lord that she needed to reach out to us and attend one of our retreats. And so she reached out, and I was just like, oh my goodness, I did not know that was part of your story. And I found myself going back through every interaction and wondering, like, did I demonstrate compassion? Was I careful in the way I interacted? Because I never would have guessed in a million years that was part of her story. And so it's important, because people like that who, she had an abortion in high school. She's been a believer for 40 years. Most of us would never guess that that's part of her story, but it was still a deep, painful part of her experience that she was grieving about and needed healing from. And so whenever we talk about this issue, we want to just keep those men and women in mind, and talk about it in the way we would if we knew that they were present, because they might be.
It's so true. We don't know people's stories, and many people don't feel comfortable sharing their stories.
Right.
And it's for many different reasons, right? I think when people internalize it, there's something about me, there's some reason they won't tell you, but abortion is a deep scar.
It is.
And people would rather have it covered up. And you're right that it's always good to assume that there may be some trauma, there may be some hurt and pain about this topic, and to talk about it with compassion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us for this interview.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.